The shoe market recently has really kind of turned into the use of bespoke details as a selling point to kind of increase the perceived value of shoes that are kind of in the mid or entry level handmade ranges. And this is a selling tactic kind of used to convey a higher value than what the shoe may actually be at. So I'm going to do my best during this video to kind of dissect that, show some examples, and answer, does this really matter? First, let's kind of dive in, define what those different areas are. So for the welt, that is the piece of leather that actually is used to construct the shoe. It goes around the edge here. The outsole is attached to. The waist, the edges of the waist here, bottom waist, and then the full outsole. So looking at Carmina, so they may or may not have fudging along the edge of the welt here. They have very nicely finished edges. They have a straight or square waist along the outside edge of the welt, and then turning into the arch, they have a beveled waist. And then moving into the bottom work, a very clean with certain pairs, they offer the JR soles, the oak bark tan leather soles, and just very clean bottom work with the blind stitch, very clean, reliable work, exactly what you should and would expect to get at this price point. St. Crispin's. St. Crispin's, another one as far as the edge finishing. You may or may not see fudging along the edge, but you are going to see a beveled waist, kind of transitioning on the beveled edge waist here. And this is really where you kind of like step up to that next notch of shoe, and the finer details are kind of consistently visible throughout. For St. Crispin's, on their 270 degree hand welded construction, you will see the same aesthetic as you do for a full like blind welted waist, but with St. Crispin's they do a pegged construction where they are kind of hammering those pegs into the outsole to complete that construction through to the heel. Now when you're looking at the fudge detail that you'll see on a pair of St. Crispin's, it is a much more kind of utilitarian aesthetic, and that kind of keeps with the brand's style and the brand's silhouette. Now looking at the bottom work on these, one observation here is they do a closed channel stitch as opposed to like a full blind stitch, and that's just where they're actually like splitting the leather here, doing that outsole stitch, and then they're hammering that shut. You may notice that it may tend to kind of expand in those areas, and a characteristic of that type of construction. So now as we move into Acme, now this is fully handmade shoes. All the pairs that I have seen, both hand welted and Norwegian construction, do have a very fine fudging detail along the welt. They will have a blind welded waist here, very thin, refined look going around the entire exterior of the shoe. Same with the arch side, very contemporary look. You are going to see consistency around having a beveled waist, and then you're also going to see consistently this heel notch detail, which is very well suited with this level of shoe. Now with the bottom work, you are going to see either the round bottom like this. They do also offer both kind of a soft fiddleback and a more exaggerated strong fiddleback on the bottom work like this. They're half Norwegian constructed shoes like this. You will see it has this same kind of aesthetic that you're seeing here. The main difference, this is actually going to be a blind pegged waist, an observation or a distinction to kind of call out there. Other than that, very refined stitch density throughout the shoe, a very refined and detailed fudging where it has that kind of edge wall here. Just these little details that you notice as you begin to continually raise the level of the shoe that you are acquiring. For Antonio Meccariello, so all of these pairs that I've seen from Meccariello, they're going to have a fudge wheel detail. Edge finishing is extremely clean, a very high stitch density along the welt, and just very clean finishing. Now on this pair, you have the full Norwegian 360 degree construction, so you're not going to have a blind or a beveled waist. Now looking at one of the traditional, fully hand welded construction pairs here, this is from the RM line, so his bespoke line, and you'll notice a very high stitch density on the outsole. I believe about like 13 stitches per inch. It has that same fudge detail that has that edge wall that we looked at on the Acme and then also the fully blind welded waist with the notch on the heel, which creates that aesthetic that, you know, the heel and the waist are kind of two different pieces of leather or two different pieces of construction. The bottom work, extremely clean, much more classic and traditional as opposed to a sharp, aggressive fiddleback waist. But this has a kind of a ridge line here, a very exaggerated round bottom, beveled edges on both sides, like we had talked about seeing as you raise up the level of shoe that you're purchasing, and overall just a very high level of traditionally handmade shoe work here. What's the difference, and does it really matter? So let's take Acme for example. So this is a fully hand welded shoe. The main differences here is that as you get into the blind welded waist here, you're going to see that the way that the technique that they use is that they have a very slim, very narrow kind of skiving of the welt that pulls in underneath the holdfast, which is the carving of the insole underneath here. And they taper that welt so that when they lay the outsole here, you only see one layer of leather go all the way to the heel, and that is the outsole. So if we're looking at it very closely, you can see the welt is tapered, clipped in, and then finished very cleanly underneath, and then covered with this outsole. And then that is how they create blind welded waist, fully hand sewn. And Meccariello shoes, you'll see two layers of leather all the way through to the heel. And what those two layers are is that you're going to see the welt that transitions all the way through to the heel, and then also the outsole that transitions and follows it, and you'll see two parallel lines there. And he is then just ironing and hammering that shut up against the upper to create that fully hand sewn blind welted waist. Is there a benefit? Does it really matter? I'm going to say that's completely up to you. It depends on what aesthetic you prefer or what you're looking for in a particular shoe. In my eyes, kind of a false comparison, because I don't necessarily think that there's only one way to do something. And I think that it's possible that I can want this aesthetic for this pair of shoes, truly love and value and appreciate the work that goes into it, but then have that same feeling, appreciation for the quality and the shape and the work that has gone onto this aesthetic, which is just a different technique for doing the same construction. Now, that's just my view, but I think that's the most reasonable way to look at things because everybody has their own techniques. So this brings me back to the original question. In my humble opinion, there's really no reason to pay for the details, but get a poorly executed or not a very harmonious shoe. The quality is really in the sum of all of the parts and the material and the quality of the execution, not just in one individual detail. Let me know your thoughts. You value like the bragging rights of being able to say, yeah, this is hand welded, but then it's not really that well done, or have a Goodyear welded or machine welded shoe with absolutely like flawless execution. Does it matter to you how the blind waist is made or which technique is used by that shoemaker? Or does it only matter that it is a fully hand sewn blind welded waist? Let me know what you think in the comments. Very curious to see what everybody's thoughts are. See you soon. Thanks.